Trijicon makes some of the most proven, battle-tested optics on the market. Optics that have stood the test of time and seen use in every sector of the industry. But they also make things like this, which no one should ever buy. This is the dual illumination RMR, specifically the 12.9 MOA triangle version. They also make 9 MOA dot versions as well, but they all suffer from the same issues, so it's not really worth noting other than the fact that they do exist. Now, full disclosure, I have no relationship with Trijicon whatsoever. This was sent in for testing by Gary, so go ahead and say thanks, Gary, in the comments down below. Getting into the defining feature of the RMR DI is that there are no batteries. That is because the power sources for the optic are the sun and/or bright ambient lighting via a fiber optic wire that wraps around the top of the housing, and a tiny bit of tritium that in theory provides your low light point of aim. Starting out with the fiber optic illumination, this is of course the green 13 MOA triangle, we'll get to that later, but regardless of my thoughts on the shape and size, it's got other problems. The first is that it's not particularly bright. Outside in full direct sunlight, it never approaches the brightness that I'm used to. Now, it is mostly usable in most situations, it's just a tad dimmer than I personally like. Now, of course, by virtue of it taking in ambient light, there is no adjustment, unless you flip on a light switch, I guess. Indoors, it's almost always too dim, and outside it's better, but it's still just a little disappointing. Now, where it falls off of a cliff is if you happen to be pointing into a light source. It doesn't have the juice to cut through reflections. In a low sun, it just disappears. Car headlights at dusk, it's kinda useless. So again, there are just certain environments where the performance drops off. Now, getting into the second power source, let's talk about the tritium illumination. It's basically useless for the naked eye, but I don't think that's what it's intended for. And under nods, it's kind of a mixed bag. Now, this section is sponsored by Noise Fighters and Optics Force. Noise Fighters sent me some Gen 3 units and their pano bridge for testing, and Optics Force sent me out a Gen 2 Plus unit, which makes for a good contrast. So go ahead and check them out in the links somewhere around. Again, there is no brightness adjustment with tritium. There is, however, half-life. Basically, over time, the tritium will dim down, and maybe 10 years or so down the road may need to be replaced. Now, at this point in time, it's brighter than is usable in truly dark situations. It blooms out just a little bit, and it's kind of large to begin with. Funnily enough, it actually looks better under the less sensitive Gen 2 Plus unit than the Gen 3 units due to them being less light sensitive. In mixed lighting conditions is where it performs the best, say in a town at night where you're going to have street lights but some very dark areas as well. That's where it performs the best because again, when you get into a truly dark environment, it's just far too bright and there's really no way to turn it down except if you know Father Time. So again, it's mostly usable in most situations and kind of unusable in others. So with all of that baggage packed, we can talk about the reticle. It is again the 12.9 or 13 MOA triangle, and I actually don't hate it. The tip works well for zeroing and shooting at distance. It's a very crisp and precise reticle, surprising for its size. For quick shooting inside of 20 yards or so, it's just a big dot that you put on the target and pull the trigger. For comp shooters who are shooting Cs, not a big deal, but if you're an A-zone only type of dude, it might be a little more annoying. Now I have the green version, so I am not sure if this next part is true for the other color variations, but while I think the reticle itself looks decent, it is unfortunately painted on the worst purple notch filter I have ever seen. Looking through this thing during the daytime was awful. Also of note, this is only my second time using an RMR, and I forgot how small and warpy the glass is. The big triangle takes up a lot of space on the purple canvas. Everything about the shooting experience on this $400 to $500 dot is kinda subpar. Now the owner, Gary, he didn't pay $400 to $500 for it. He actually got it used in a trade for like $200 or something like that, and maybe that's what I'll say about it at that price. Now for all of those downsides, what do you get? Well, you don't have to swap batteries every several years. That's it. Now I know a few people who hate batteries in all things. But even in the RMR DI, you are relying on the tritium, which is going to die out eventually on its own anyways. The better solution than relying on a singular battery is to have a stash of batteries and co-witness irons. I don't really know who would buy one of these, and I really don't recommend buying one at all. Now, to briefly go over a few other things, this is still using the forged RMR housing, but with cutouts for the fiber optics. So while the body is strong, it does have less material than the standard RMR. Turrets are nice with 1 MOA increments, and the mounting pattern is, well, RMR. As I have mentioned, being mostly usable in most situations implies that it's kinda useless in some situations as well, which for me knocks this optic completely out of my consideration. I don't like auto-adjusting red dots, and I also don't like not being able to adjust my red dots. Battery life is usually measured in years at this point, and batteries are currently cheap and easy to find, so you should have a stockpile. Maybe some people out there think of this as a end of the world or apocalypse dot for 50 years in the future when batteries no longer function. The bad news is that if you're watching this video, then you probably aren't functioning at that point either. And of course, we already have a battery-free aiming solution attached to your handgun. Iron sights. Anyways, with all that out of the way, guys, let me know what you think of the Trijicon Dual Illumination RMR. A very interesting design. It just doesn't work out all that well in actual use. And again, it's one of the more painful red dots to use. Ugly glass. Big reticle that kinda works. It's never quite bright enough in bright environments, and it's never really dim enough in dim environments, so it's kinda just a little special. But with all that out of the way, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. God bless.